Hello, I'm the Little Filmmaker, here to take the cynicism out of criticism. I think today I should go ahead and review a very widely hated film, Disaster Movie.
For those who don't know, Seltzerberg is the nickname of Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer. These two out of the 4 writers of Scary Movie are responsible for movies such as Date Movie, Epic Movie, Meet the Spartans, Vampire Sucks, and more. Most of these movies have been widely derided, and some have even claimed that they killed the parody genre. I mean, you can't put all the blame on them, but it is tempting to. Disaster Movie is commonly considered the worst of the bunch, and if you look at its Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb rating, it will appear that nobody likes this movie.
Well, almost nobody. If you look, you can find positive reviews somewhere. It's just that even the positive reviews of this movie make it seem bad.
Most reviewers don't know what they're talking about. Honestly, a irreverent film that had me rolling. Recommend getting stoned before watching the film.
Yeah, those dumbass reviewers watch this movie sober. And as we all know, a good movie is one that requires mind-altering drugs before watching it.
I can understand why some people hate this movie. It's not PC and goes after dull and gore of global warming king. If you don't like satire or have thin skin, you will not like this movie. Not for snowflakes. No, this isn't going to win any Oscars. However, if you have wackiness sense of humor, it's really quite enjoyable. Nothing is sacred or PC here, so if you're easily offended, consider this your trigger warning.
Oh, so that's what the edgelords are complaining about these days. It's that we don't make movies like Disaster Movie anymore.
Another hilarious spoof. What's with all the haters? First, I must say that this is another hilarious spoof. Then I must say that the people who hate these movies are ridiculous. I'm sorry, but Airplane is barely funny at all.
Nope, sorry, nope. I mean, I personally believe that there's no such thing as bad taste in movies. But if you're going to tell me that Airplane isn't funny, but Disaster Movie is, then I'm not going to take film recommendations from you, bro.
That guy has a point though. This movie should be compared to Airplane. They both have multiple directors who usually work together, and they both parody disaster movies, in theory. Airplane is considered one of the pinnacles of spoof movies. The only films that are considered more legendary are the works of Mel Brooks. This, on the other hand, is considered the lowest of the low. I believe it's important to ask what makes this good and this bad. The answer is clearly that one is funny and the other is not. But I believe that answer isn't interesting or helpful. We need to ask why one is funny and the other is not. Now, art is subjective, so there aren't any rules, but there are guidelines. We can't make a film that's objectively funny, but we can try to find out why Airplane seems to make more people laugh. As someone who has grown up on silly spoof movies and even has written some parodies himself, finding guidelines for humor is super relevant to me. So let's discover why Airplane is funnier than Disaster Movie. Before we go into the comparison, I will state that I'm reviewing the unrated version of Disaster Movie. For those who don't remember, unrated versions are versions of films with added shots and scenes that weren't screened for the MPAA. Back in the 2000s, poorly received PG-13 comedies liked to release an unrated cut because the film being unrated told horny teenage boys one thing: there's a possibility of female-presenting nipples. 13-year-old boys will look at the unrated cut, see topless ladies, and think,
"That's it? Female-presenting nipples aren't really that much different than male-presenting nipples. Though, they're not allowed to walk around shirtless. It seems like a sexist double standard." You're right, dude! Though, I still enjoy looking at them. Fascinating. Do you think it might have something to do with society deeming it taboo, so we see that area of the human body as a bit of a forbidden fruit? Like, I've done some reading, and the fascination and sexualization of female breasts is actually a relatively recent phenomenon. There were times when ankles were more sexualized. Nice insight, dude! We're getting historical in here! Though, I think you might need to cite some sources. Of course! Let's go to the university library!
so what does the unrated version of Disaster Movie show? Man-ass. Yep, that's it. It's a little funny to think of some 13-year-old boys renting this movie for the purpose of bare breasts and just getting man-ass. Though I do wonder if this movie was someone's bisexual awakening. I do want to bring some more attention to the back of the DVD case because it's ridiculous. Look at these meteors! They're right next to each other! It's funny because they resemble testicles, which is a part of the anatomy society has deemed taboo. What clever comedy! I think I should try it. Guys, I think I did it. I think I perfected comedy. Let's see what the bag says. Prepare for earth-shaking hilarity as the raunchy and outrageous team behind Date Movie, Epic Movie, and Meet the Spartans put the world's very survival in the hands of 3 buxom non-brainiacs. Buxom, huh? Buxom means a plump woman with large breasts. Here are the two leads. Oh yeah, that adjective definitely describes them. I'm guessing the DVD case really wants you to think that these three women on the cover are the real stars. She is the main character's girlfriend, who is barely in the movie. She is in one scene, and Kim Kardashian over here dies halfway through the film. This movie really wants young boys to think that there are naked women in this film. Funnily enough, Airplane actually beats this movie in that regard. So prepubescent boys, if you really want to see 1 second of boobs, go with Airplane. Though 1 second of breasts is one of the last reasons you should be watching Airplane. Moving on, as I previously stated, Kim Kardashian is in this movie. This is her first acting role actually. How did she do?
Somebody help us! Isn't there anybody that can help?
She gives a performance that this movie deserves.
Sorry. I have a terrible procrastination habit. Now, let's move on and find out what makes Airplane a comedy classic and disaster movie a, well, catastrophe.
Disaster Movie is a decade-old mess of a film that is worse today than it was when it was first released, and it wasn't exactly loved then. The first problem is that most of the film is pretty dated. It makes fun of pretty much every movie that came out around 2008. Now, some movies like Iron Man, Kung Fu Panda, and Alvin and the Chipmunks ended up becoming big franchises, so references to them still hold up. The same cannot be said about movies like Wanted, Hancock, 10,000 BC, Jumper, Beowulf, The Love Guru, The Hottie and the Naughty, the American Gladiator reboot, the I'm Matt Damon song, and the Head On advertisement. I get many of the references because I was in my late teens at the time, but I can't imagine what it's like to watch this movie if you weren't aware of the pop culture at the time. When you make pop culture references, sometimes you take a risk of setting an expiration date on your jokes. Like, I would watch an old episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged and sometimes be confused by references I was there for.
I activate enemy controller. Wait, I thought you had to be online to play with that thing.
What? Oh, yeah. Xbox One was initially gonna force the players to be online to use any of their games. And then they undid the policy. At least I believe so. I don't know. I'm a Switch user.
Now, Disaster Movie is definitely guilty of this. I even made a video asking if people got all the references in Disaster Movie, and while I didn't get many responses, the ones I did get told me no. Some didn't even understand half the references. This obviously dates the film severely, and makes it where each year that passes, the movie becomes worse and worse. Sometimes they try to get past this by explaining the reference.
I am Beowulf.
Can you put some clothes on?
I am Beowulf. I fought the monster Grendel with no armor, and that is how I will fight you.
Wait, you fight naked?
I am Beowulf.
It's kind of gay, bro.
It is not gay. I should know because I am gay, but I'm not for you. What? Why not? What's wrong with me? Would you want your answer alphabetically or in a top 10 list?
Shows what you know. The DVD case called me Buxom.
It's great that they did this because, as everyone knows, explaining your joke makes it funnier.
Compare this to Airplane and how it handled a joke that was in danger of becoming dated.
Would either of you like another cup of coffee?
I will, but Jim won't.
I think I will have another cup of coffee.
Jim never has a second cup of coffee at home.
Now, I never really got this joke, but I always assumed it was a reference to a coffee commercial or something. I was correct. This joke is a reference to a U-Bond coffee commercial from the 70s. They even got the actress from the commercial to say that line in the movie. It's like if a film today had Flo in it talk about car inserts. This joke is pretty dated now, but its inclusion is actually pretty smart, since they call back to it later.
I should have had that second cup of coffee.
Jim never vomits at home.
Now, this joke is still funny because they set it up earlier. As you see, it contextualizes the reference without ruining the joke. Yes, Airplane also makes jokes referencing Jaws and Saturday Night Fever without contextualizing the references. But both of those movies were already out for a couple years at that point and were proven successes. They were more likely to be remembered by future generations than something like The Love Guru or 10,000 BC. Many of the jokes in Disaster Movie about the franchises they're parodying are very obvious and surface area jokes, like having a joke where the Hulk's transformation breaks his pants. This is probably because many of the films they're spoofing were not released when the film was scripted, meaning that they were spoofing the movies based on the trailer. Now, this would be okay if this was a short video making fun of the trailer specifically, but it's not. I know from personal experience that you should at least watch something before you parody it. If you don't, then you usually resort to the most obvious jokes, and you make giant ignorant mistakes. Just look at this comic from divisive webcomic author Adam Ellis about the film Shape of Water. Now, anyone who has seen the movie or even saw the trailer could see the mistake in this comic. Eliza, the female lead of The Shape of Water, is mute. Also, look at what joke he goes with.
Guillermo del Toro's a furry!
Yeah, by the time this comic came out, he was the 7,028th person to make this joke. Probably because it's the most obvious joke you could make. As I said, this is what happens when you parody something that you haven't seen. Though this comic was made months after the film came out, and it references the egg stuff, so I'm pretty sure he did see the movie.
He probably went with the obvious joke because, well, that's his modus operandi. It's why he's so divisive. And as for making Eliza talk, well, bad writing.
In Disaster Movie, there is a very clear difference between how they parodied movies that came out in 2008 and movies that came out in 2007. With movies that came out in 2007, like Juno, Enchanted, and Beowulf, they actually make jokes that involve stuff that happened in those movies.
Munching me harder than Rachel Ray chowing down Eggs Benedict on $40 a day. Why?
Even when the bitch is dying, she don't shut up with her witty repartee.
With movies that came out in 2008, they either parodied a prominent moment in the trailer, like with Don't Mess with the Zohan, Wanted, and Sex and the City, or they simply have a character show up in a mostly unrelated joke. For example, the joke where various superheroes show up to stop a tornado and they all get hit by cows. Those could have been anti-superheroes. The only reason those superheroes showed up is because they had movies that came out in 2008. If this came out in 2011, they would have had Captain America, Thor, and Green Lantern show up, and the joke would have been about the same, well, except for the highly original gag where Hulk breaks his pants. Now it's time to talk about the other major problem with them referencing so many movies in Disaster Movie. The film completely lacks focus because of it. Disaster Movie isn't really about disaster movies. While the plot does involve natural disasters, the target of ridicule are simply just movies that came out around that time. A more accurate title for the movie would have been Recent Movies. Recent Movies 2? 3? It doesn't really have a base to build jokes off of. I noticed that most parodies worth a damn pick a specific target, whether it's a specific text or a specific genre, then satirize it to make it funny. It takes a narrative you're familiar with, yet subverts its tropes to make it funny. Let's look back at Airplane. It has an amazing base. It's actually a remake of a 1957 airplane disaster film called 0 Hour. They took the script to 0 Hour and just added jokes to it, to the point where they pretty much riffed lines from the original film.
I think you ought to know what our chances are. The life of everybody aboard depends on just one thing. Finding someone back there who not only can fly this plane, but who didn't have fish for dinner.
I think you ought to know what our chances are. The life of everyone on board depends upon just one thing. Finding someone back there who can not only fly this plane, but who didn't have fish for dinner.
It's practically a prototype for MST3K. That's probably why more of the jokes land in Airplane, because they are relevant in subverting something. Disaster Movie just throws in random references to stuff that were popular at the time. For example, there's a scene where main character man has a super sweet 16 party, where Black Friend and Kim Kardashian are worried that the guys from Superbad are going to steal the booze. So Kim wants Black Friend to shoot them. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a clear shot, so he needs to curve the bullet past a piece of meat and Common Electra. Kim and Common get into an argument that leads to a wrestling match, which ends in a game of Twister. However, that turns out to be a fantasy of Black Friend, because why would such nonsense actually happen in the movie? In the realistic real world, Black Friend curves a bullet past Common Electra in order to kill the guys from Superbad, but instead ends up killing Dr. Phil, Anton Chigurh, and eventually Common Electra herself. This is just nonsensical reference piled upon nonsensical reference. Yes, Airplane referenced Jaws in Saturday Night Fever, but for the most part, it stayed focused on spoofing disaster movies. It didn't throw in references to Star Wars, A Love Story, and Superman randomly. One thing I learned during my contemplation is that a lot of comedy comes from contrast. Absurd comedy seems to come from contrasting something normal with something absurd. Look at Pop Team Epic. Usually there's a somewhat normal scenario, but then our protagonists come in and bring absurdity into the situation with their eccentric personalities. If the role was just as insane as the characters, then the jokes would probably not work.
Want me to prove that comedy works better with some contrast? I'll do that. Take the silly hat. Now, what would be funnier? If I wore this silly hat while doing something silly, Mr. Silly Pants, oh, I'm so silly, oh my goodness, I have my underwear inside out. Or if I wore this silly hat while doing something serious. I'm really sorry, but your daughter has cancer.
Airplane does contrast really well. Airplane, for the most part, is played straight. The cast is mostly comprised by serious actors like Leslie Nielsen and Peter Graves, who say the lines with complete sincerity, and the film is presented like a traditional disaster movie. That way, Airplane comes off like it's a real disaster movie, except absurd events happen with the characters treating it like it's normal. With disaster movie, there is no normal, so there's almost no contrast. It's mostly just absurdity piled upon absurdity. Here's an example. There's the scene where the gang meets Giselle from Enchanted.
By the way, it's redundant to parody Enchanted because it's already a spoof movie.
It turns out Giselle is a sex worker addicted to coke, and Prince Edward is her pimp. Black Friend wants to be with Giselle, so he gets in a fight with Prince Edward that ends in a dance-off. First of all, this was the second time that Seltzerberg parodied You Just Got Served in 2008. But more relevantly, they contrasted absurdity with absurdity. Compare it to this famous joke from Airplane.
I can't stand it anymore. I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Stewardess, please let me handle this.
I've got to get
Calm down now. Get back to your seat. I'll take care of this. Calm down. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Doctor, you're one on the phone. Everything's gonna be all right. Please.
Sister, please, I'll handle this.
I've got to get out of here. Out of here. Out of here. I've got to get out of here.
Notice how the scene starts very normal, but it slowly escalates into absurdity. Slapping someone that's hysterical is a common trope, but the scene gets more and more ridiculous when more and more people come to slap the woman. This scene is so funny that you probably didn't notice that the nun gave one of the worst slaps in cinema history. I feel like escalating from someplace normal tends to be funnier than just starting from absurd and adding more absurdity. Disaster movie actually does have a problem with just piling too much on. Like another joke that sticks out in my mind is when the disaster starts happening. Hannah Montana gets hit by an asteroid, and the characters are shocked to find out that she's really Miley Cyrus. That might have been a funny gag, but they stretch it out for so long by having Hannah constantly talk till she finally dies.
Oh, no! Well, goodbye, all my fans! Keep rocking! Also, remind your parents to pick up your official Hannah Montana lunchbox. Montana concert this Wednesday, 8/7 Central. And let me just say, those totally sexy and utterly provocative pictures of me. If you'll notice in those pictures, I'm wearing my new line of sexy Hannah Montana lingerie. No shit, Sherlock. All I do is wear a wig and change my voice a little bit, and those dumb kids can't tell the difference. Featuring songs from my dad, Billy Ray, only $9.95.
This extended joke doesn't escalate the absurdity as much as it keeps the same level of absurdity and completely throws off the timing. This gag about Hannah Montana getting hit by an asteroid goes on for 2 minutes and 16 seconds. Compare that with the slapping gag from Airplane, which only goes on for 31 seconds. It's like disaster movie tries to tell 2 or 3 jokes at the same time, and they just crash into each other. One last relevant point to this compare and contrast is how the two different films approach random humor. At first appearance, it appears both films have random moments that don't adhere to any real-world logic. But you need to look closer at the context. While both films have moments that defy any real-world explanation, there is a sense of logic to Airplane. When something absurd happens, it follows a comedic logic. It's clear why it's happening, like it's a visual pun or something.
It was at that moment that I first realized Elaine had doubts about our relationship. And that, as much as anything else, led to my drinking problem.
Automatic pilot.
Automatic pilot. There it is.
All right, I'm going to level with with you all. Most important thing now is that you remain calm. There's no reason to panic. Now, it is true that one of the crew members is ill. Slightly ill. But the other two pilots are just fine. They're at the controls flying the plane, free to pursue a life of religious fulfillment.
Plus, as stated earlier, the movie is somewhat grounded enough that the absurdity comes off as funny. Let's look at this scene.
2 more minutes. They could be miles off course.
That's impossible. They're on instruments.
Where did those characters get the instruments, and why are they playing the instruments? Because Captain Rex Kramer said they have instruments. You don't need a logical explanation. If you got one, the joke would not be as funny. While the joke doesn't follow any real-world logic, it does follow comedic logic. In Disaster Movie, when something random happens, there's usually no rhyme or reason to it. They'll just throw in an absurd happening or a character from a current movie. There's a scene where the main characters take shelter and for no reason run into the ladies from Sex and the City. And again, for almost no reason, their Juno stand-in kicks the Carrie stand-in like Zohan in You Don't Mess with the Zohan. It seems like there's no reason most of the parody characters are just hostile towards our leads. Instead of finding it funny, I'm just confused by what's happening on screen. As I said, there doesn't need to be any story logic. There just needs to be some comedic logic, but there usually isn't any. It's like Disaster Movie just throws out punchlines without the setup. But the funny thing is that Disaster Movie could have easily explained why all these pop culture characters are here. Just look at this scene.
What's happening?
Everything in the museum is coming to life!
Now, with a little bit of rewriting, you could have incorporated the tablet from Night of the Museum into the plot, and Disaster Movie would have made sense. Just have it where the tablet that brings stuff to life is supposed to go to a museum, but accidentally goes to a movie theater instead. This ends up bringing the characters from the movies at the theater to life, and they start wreaking havoc. This would explain why all these characters are here, and why they're hostile towards our heroes. It would also give the film a solid plot and grounding element. It probably would still suck, but at least it wouldn't be one of the most hated films of all time.
Now let's see what Disaster Movie gets on my personal recommendation meter. It gets, I recommend you avoid it.
It's just a bunch of thin surface level parodies of movies that came out at the time. It barely counts as a movie. I would say that this movie wasn't as hard to sit through as I thought it would be, but that's because I got used to this film's bad qualities about 10 minutes in. Afterwards, it was just monotonous. It's a very consistent type of bad is what I'm saying. Airplane, on the other hand, gets a full recommendation. It's a comedy classic that still holds up. Disaster Movie, on the other hand, didn't even hold up at the time, much less over a decade later.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you all have a lovely day.